Good morning, everyone. So, today we are going to learn about neuron. What is a neuron? Neuron is a basic structural and functional unit of a nervous system. First, we will see about the different parts of a neuron. The parts of a neuron are cell body, dendrite, dendron, nucleus. Then we have the axon, axonites, which are the branches of axon, and we have the insulation or the myelin sheath, and last we have the synaptic node. Let us see a video of how these parts function in a neuron.
Contains tens of billions of neurons that are connected to each other. Each neuron has a cell body with several branches. The smaller branches, called dendrites, receive signals that come together, and then the total signal is transmitted through the longest branch, the axon. Similar to how a wire carries electricity from a switch to an electric bulb, the axon carries nerve impulses from a cell body to the next cell.
So now we saw the different parts of a neuron. Now let us see how an impulse is being transmitted through a neuron. So we can see three figures here. It is a figure of an axon. From this image, from the first image, we can see that when an axon or when a neuron is at rest, the outer surface of the neuron is positive and the inner surface of the membrane of the neuron is negative in charge. Now in the second image, we can see that when the neuron or when the membrane of the neuron is being stimulated, when a stimulus is applied onto the membrane, the inner surface becomes positive and the outer surface becomes negative. So due to this momentary charge difference that stimulates its adjacent parts, similar changes also occur there. So as this proceeds, the impulse gets transmitted as electric charges. So I hope this is clear to you. This is how an impulse is being generated and conducted through a neuron. Now let us see how this impulse is being transmitted from one neuron to the next neuron, and that is called transmission of impulse through a neuron. For an impulse to be transmitted from one neuron to the next neuron, we must know the pathway through which an impulse transmits from the dendrite to the synaptic node. That is what is being shown in the video that we will see now. This is a neuron. When an impulse travels through a neuron, it moves from the dendrites to the cell body through the axon into the tip of the axonite called the synaptic node. So I talked about how an impulse is being transmitted from one neuron to the next neuron. That takes place through something called a synapse. Synapse is a junction between two neurons, or a neuron and a muscle cell, or a neuron and a glandular cell. Here there is a neuron called a presynaptic neuron and another neuron called the postsynaptic neuron. When the impulse from one neuron reaches a synaptic node, there are structures called synaptic vesicles. These synaptic vesicles release some chemicals called neurotransmitters. So when an impulse reaches a synaptic node, the synaptic vesicles release those neurotransmitters, these chemicals, into the synaptic cleft, which is the gap or the space between the presynaptic neuron and the postsynaptic neuron. So when the neurotransmitters are released into the gap or into the synaptic cleft, these are captured by some receptors or some structures called the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. Okay. In this image, we can see the clear idea of what synaptic transmission is. Here we can see the presynaptic neuron, the synaptic gap or the synaptic cleft, and the postsynaptic neuron. When the impulse or the nerve impulse reaches the terminus of the axon or the end of the synaptic knob, the vesicles called the synaptic vesicles release the neurotransmitters. Some examples of the neurotransmitters are acetylcholine, dopamine, etc. So these neurotransmitters are captured by the neurotransmitter receptors, which then carry the impulse to the next neuron. So I hope this is clear to you. Now let us watch a video of the transmission of nerve impulses from one neuron to the next neuron.
Nerve impulses are electrical messages transmitted along nerve fibers at high speed. However, nerve impulses cannot travel directly from one neuron to another. Let's see how nerve impulses are transmitted between neurons. The point where the axon of one neuron joins the cell body or dendron of another neuron is called a synapse. The ending of the axon is called a synaptic knob. When a nerve impulse reaches the synaptic knob, it stimulates the synaptic knob to release a chemical called neurotransmitter from synaptic vesicles. The neurotransmitter diffuses across the synaptic cleft. It stimulates the cell body or dendron of the next neuron to generate a nerve impulse to continue with the transmission.
Okay, so in this class we had learned about what a nerve cell or what a neuron is, the parts of the neuron, the different functions of a neuron, how an impulse is being generated, being carried through and transmitted into the next neuron through a synapse. So I hope all this is clear to you. We will learn more about neurons in the next class. Have a nice day.